I never thought I'd be writing this, but I'm at my wit's end and need advice. I'm a 32-year-old woman married to my husband Jake, 35, for 5 years now. We've had our ups and downs like any couple, but things took a turn for the worse when Jake's sister, Megan, 29, moved in with us 2 years ago. When Megan first moved in, I was excited. I thought it would be a great opportunity to bond with my sister-in-law and strengthen our family ties. But boy, was I wrong. From day one, Megan has been nothing but trouble. She's rude, inconsiderate, and downright disrespectful towards me. The weird part? She's always on her best behavior around Jake. At first, I tried to brush it off. I told myself that maybe she was just going through a rough patch and needed time to adjust. But as weeks turned into months, her behavior only got worse. She would leave her dirty dishes all over the house, play loud music at odd hours, and invite her friends over without asking. When I tried to talk to her about it, she'd either ignore me or make snide comments under her breath. But the real problem started when things began disappearing from our house. At first, it was small stuff. A pair of earrings here, a watch there. I didn't want to jump to conclusions, but I had a sinking feeling in my gut. Then, larger items started vanishing. My laptop, Jake's golf clubs, even our wedding photo album. I confronted Megan about it, but she denied everything. She acted offended that I would even suggest such a thing. When I told Jake about my suspicions, he brushed them off. He said I was being paranoid and that I needed to be more understanding of his sister's situation. You see, Megan had a rough childhood. Their parents divorced when they were young, and their mom struggled with addiction. Jake practically raised Megan himself, which is why he's so protective of her. I get it. I really do. But that doesn't excuse her behavior. Things came to a head last month when my grandmother's antique necklace went missing. It was a family heirloom, passed down through generations. I knew I had left it in my jewelry box, but when I went to wear it for a special occasion, it was gone. I tore the house apart looking for it, but deep down, I knew what had happened. I confronted Megan again, this time with Jake present. I laid out all my suspicions, the pattern of missing items, and how I'd seen her sneaking out late at night with bags. Megan burst into tears, claiming I was bullying her and making her feel unwelcome in her own brother's home. Jake comforted her and then turned to me with a look of disappointment I'll never forget. He told me I was being childish and paranoid. He said I needed to grow up and stop making up stories about his sister. We got into a huge fight, screaming at each other like we never had before. Jake accused me of being jealous of his relationship with Megan, while I begged him to see reason. Since then, things have been unbearably tense in our house. Jake and I barely speak, and when we do, it usually ends in an argument. Megan smirks at me when Jake's not looking, knowing she's won. I feel like I'm going crazy, doubting myself and my own perceptions. I've tried talking to friends about it, but they all say the same thing. That blood is thicker than water, and that I should try to make peace for the sake of my marriage. But how can I when I know I'm being gaslit and stolen from in my own home? I'm at a loss. I love Jake, and I want our marriage to work, but I can't keep living like this. The constant tension, the feeling of not being believed or supported by my own husband. It's eating away at me. I've even started to wonder if I should just leave, but the thought of giving up on my marriage terrifies me. I guess what I'm asking is, am I crazy? Am I overreacting? Should I just suck it up and try to make peace with Megan for Jake's sake? Or should I stand my ground and risk losing my marriage? I never thought I'd be in this position, torn between my love for my husband and my own sanity and self-respect. Any advice would be appreciated. I feel so alone and don't know where to turn. Thanks for reading this far, if you have. I just needed to get this off my chest. Certainly, I'll now write the first update as requested. Update 1. It's been a month since my last post, and I wish I could say things have gotten better, but they've only gotten worse. I want to thank everyone who commented on my original post. Your support and advice meant more to me than I can express. However, the situation has taken a turn I never could have imagined. About 3 weeks ago, Megan started dating a guy named Alex. At first, I was relieved, thinking that having a boyfriend might keep her out of the house more. But as it turns out, Alex is just as bad as Megan, if not worse. Alex is the kind of guy who tries too hard to be likable. He's always cracking jokes, offering to help around the house, and acting like the perfect gentleman when Jake is around. But when Jake's not there, it's a different story. At first, it was just small things. He'd make comments about my appearance that made me uncomfortable, like telling me I should wear tighter clothes or asking if I worked out. I tried to brush it off, not wanting to cause more drama, but then his comments became more explicit and vulgar. One day when Jake and Megan were out, Alex came over unexpectedly. He said he was looking for Megan, but the way he leered at me made my skin crawl. He made a crude joke about my body and then asked if Jake satisfied me. I told him to leave, but he just laughed it off. I wanted to tell Jake about Alex's behavior, but I knew he wouldn't believe me. He'd probably accuse me of trying to sabotage his sister's relationship out of jealousy or spite. So I kept quiet and tried to avoid being alone with Alex. But last week, things escalated in a way I never could have predicted. Jake was at work, and Megan had gone out shopping. I was home alone doing some laundry when I heard the front door open. I assumed it was Megan returning early, so I didn't think much of it. Suddenly, I felt someone grab me from behind. I spun around to find Alex, his eyes wild and his breath reeking of alcohol. He tried to kiss me, mumbling something about how he'd always wanted me. I screamed and pushed him away, but he grabbed me again, his hands rough and firm. I managed to break free and ran for the door, yelling at him to get out. He stumbled after me, but in his drunken state, he tripped and fell. I seized the opportunity to lock myself in the bathroom and called Jake, sobbing and begging him to come home. Jake rushed home, and by the time he arrived, Alex was gone. I was a mess, shaking, crying, my clothes torn. I told Jake everything, about Alex's previous comments, about how he'd grabbed me, about how scared I was. For a moment, I thought Jake finally believed me. He held me and told me it would be okay. But then Megan came home and everything changed. Megan burst into tears when she saw the state I was in. But instead of being concerned for me, she launched into a story about how she'd come home earlier to find me trying to seduce Alex. She claimed that when Alex rejected me, I'd thrown myself on the ground and torn my own clothes to make it look like he'd attacked me. I was stunned. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I turned to Jake, certain that he'd see through his sister's lies. But the look on his face told me everything I needed to know. He believed her. Jake told me he needed some time alone to process everything. He said he couldn't live with someone who would try to seduce his sister's boyfriend and then lie about it. The pain and betrayal in his voice cut me to the core. I realized then that this was it. This was the moment our marriage ended. Not with a bang, but with a whimper. With a lie so outrageous that it should have been laughable, but instead was the final nail in the coffin of our relationship. I didn't argue. I didn't try to defend myself. What was the point? Jake had made his choice long ago, and it wasn't me. So I packed a bag, called a friend to pick me up, and left. It's been 2 weeks since then. I'm staying with my best friend, trying to piece my life back together. Jake has called a few times, asking when I'm coming home, acting as if nothing major has happened. Each time I tell him I need more time. The truth is, I don't think I'm going back. The realization that my husband would believe such a ridiculous lie over my truth has shattered any remaining illusions I had about our marriage. I deserve better than this. I deserve to be believed, to be supported, to be loved unconditionally. I'm meeting with a divorce lawyer next week to discuss my options. It's not the ending I wanted for my marriage, but I'm starting to realize it might be the beginning I need for the rest of my life. Thank you all again for your support. I'll update again when I have more news. Certainly. I'll now write the second update as requested. Update 2. It's been 2 months since my last update, and 5 months since I left my husband Jake. A lot has happened, and I wanted to share it with you all, as your support has been invaluable during this difficult time. These past months have been a roller coaster of emotions. There were days when I could barely get out of bed, overwhelmed by the loss of my marriage and the betrayal I'd experienced. Other days, I felt a sense of freedom and hope for the future. My friends and family have been my rock, offering support, love, and occasionally a much-needed reality check. I moved out of my friend's place and into a small apartment of my own. It's not much, but it's mine. And for the first time in a long time, I feel safe in my own space. I've been seeing a therapist to work through the trauma of what happened with Alex and the years of gaslighting from Jake and Megan. It's been hard, but I'm slowly starting to rebuild my self-esteem and trust in my own perceptions. Jake and I hadn't spoken much since I left. He called a few times in the beginning, always with the same question. When was I coming home? I always gave the same answer. I needed more time. Eventually, the call stopped, and I thought that was the end of it. But last week, out of the blue, I got a call from Jake. His voice sounded different, defeated, almost broken. He told me he needed to talk to me in person. Against my better judgment, I agreed to meet him at a local coffee shop. When I saw Jake, I hardly recognized him. He looked like he'd aged years in just a few months. His eyes were bloodshot, and he couldn't seem to look me in the face. We sat down, and for a long moment, neither of us spoke. Finally, Jake broke the silence. He told me that Megan and Alex had disappeared. They'd cleaned out Jake's bank account, stolen a bunch of valuable items from the house, including some family heirlooms, and vanished without a trace. As Jake spoke, I felt a strange mix of emotions wash over me. Part of me felt vindicated. Finally, Jake was seeing the truth about his sister that I'd known all along. But another part of me felt deeply sad for him. Despite everything, I knew how much he loved Megan, and how betrayed he must feel. Jake went on to tell me that after Megan and Alex disappeared, he started looking back at everything that had happened. He realized that all the things I'd accused Megan of stealing over the years, they were all gone too. He'd found pawn shop receipts in Megan's room dating back months. With tears in his eyes, Jake looked at me and said the words I'd been longing to hear for years. "You were right. About everything. I'm so sorry I didn't believe you." In that moment, I felt a weight lift off my shoulders. All the times I'd doubted myself, all the nights I'd lain awake wondering if I was crazy, it all melted away. I was right. I'd always been right. Jake asked if there was any chance we could work things out. He said he'd been a fool, that he'd taken me for granted, and that he wanted to make things right. For a split second, I considered it. But then I remembered all the pain, all the arguments, all the times he'd chosen Megan over me. I took a deep breath and told Jake that while I appreciated his apology, it was too late. The trust between us was broken beyond repair. I told him that I'd already filed for divorce, and that I thought it was best if we went our separate ways. Jake nodded, tears streaming down his face. He said he understood, and that he hoped one day I could forgive him. We sat there in silence for a while, both of us mourning the end of our marriage and the years we'd lost. As I walked away from that coffee shop, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. Sad for the love we'd lost, for the years wasted, for the pain we'd both endured. But relief that I was finally free, that I could finally move forward without doubt or guilt weighing me down. These past few months have been the hardest of my life, but they've also been transformative. I've learned to trust myself, to stand up for what I know is right, and to demand the respect and love I deserve. I don't know what the future holds, but for the first time in a long time, I'm excited to find out. To everyone who's been following my story and offering support, thank you. Your words of encouragement and advice have meant more to me than you could ever know. If there's one thing I've learned from this experience, it's the importance of trusting your instincts and surrounding yourself with people who believe in you. I don't know if I'll post again. I feel like this chapter of my life is finally closing. But I wanted to share this final update with you all. Here's to new beginnings and brighter tomorrows.